Coming to you from Mainframe Art Studios at 900 Keogh Way in downtown Des Moines, this is 900 Views, a podcast about building community through the arts as we build an arts community. I'm your host, Pat Bodie, and today I'm in Gretchen Bohling Design Mainframe Studio number 447, where Gretchen Bohling works on her fashion brand promoting ethical and sustainable design. Gretchen's a graduate of Illinois Institute of Art in Chicago, where she earned her bachelor's degree in fine arts with a focus on fashion design. Now, I have a co-interviewer here today with me, Love T. Tody, who's a senior at Urbandale High School with a very serious interest in fashion. So Love T will be asking some of the questions today. But to get it started, Gretchen, you say that your mission at GBD, or Gretchen Bohling Design, is to, quote, provide the highest quality, sustainably handmade wardrobe for clients and educate them on how to maintain an ethical wardrobe. You go on to mention the slow fashion movement. I'm sure that's something new for many of our listeners, so can you tease that out a little bit? Tell us a little bit more about both ethical wardrobe and slow fashion.
Yeah, so I guess to start, one of the biggest things with the fashion industry in general, and I'm sure you know this, Love T, is that behind the oil industry, it's actually the most pollutant-causing industry in the world, with waste specifically from fabric and all the water that it takes to wash fabric and stuff like that. So with my business, it's really important to me to be sustainable and ethical, not only with the private label collection that I make by hand, but also, teaching and educating my clients to, instead of throwing out clothing, maybe get it altered and fixed, mended, that sort of thing, so that it can, the life of the clothing can be prolonged and it's not ending up in a landfill, kind of thinking of the life cycle of clothing in general.
How big a lift is this? I mean, how responsive are people to this kind of concept? I personally think it's wonderful. I'm a big conservationist, but tell me how people are reacting.
Actually, I think, right now with the fashion industry, this is kind of the direction that it's going. I think because so many people have made it, just communicated, and people have become aware of the fact that it's bad for the world and for the environment. So people are trying to be, or consumers are trying to be a little bit more conscious of where they're buying their clothing. Even if it's from, a brand that, is, well known in a large company, they're going to, put the brand on the spot as to where they're sourcing.
Challenge them a little bit.
Challenge them a little bit to where they're doing their manufacturing. Are there, employees overseas getting paid a living wage, and the cotton it goes as far back as like the cotton farmers. Are they being, treated healthy? All the pesticides that they have to spray on that cotton, that's also not an ethical in the sense of their lives are being, affected in that way. So it's another thing to think about, and kind of going back to fast fashion versus slow fashion. Now I don't know if you've heard that Forever 21 is going bankrupt, because they're listening to the slow fashion movement. They're not wanting to support as much these companies that you're buying clothing for, $3 or $4. That doesn't even make sense when you think about it from a design standpoint, the amount of time and amount of resources that it takes to make the clothing. The people that are making it obviously aren't getting paid a living wage, so the consumers are not wanting to support that. I don't know if you can call it a business model, but so, things that you can see the change in that because these, Forever 21 has been around a long time and a lot of people shop there, but it's gone bankrupt, so that says something.
So Love to, if you want to go into fashion, this should be kind of good news in a way, right?
Yes.
What questions do you have for Gretchen?
So what do you think if y'all had a program for young boys and girls who need support with clothes and things like that?
Okay, so again, kind of going with the sustainable and ethical, model that I do for my business. I also teach sewing lessons privately at my studio here, and then throughout the city and for DMAC and all of that. But one of the main things that I try to do with my private sewing lessons, depending on the goal of the individual that I'm teaching, whether that person wants to go and start their own business and learn how to make their own clothes and sell them one day, or if it's just somebody that is wanting to, make a Halloween costume or something like that. So, a lot of the private sewing students that I have, I teach at a beginner, an advanced, or an intermediate or an advanced level. So that is, the beginner is just, kind of like they want to make a project with me. It takes a matter of, 6 hours to do. All the way to advanced, which is, learning essentially what I went to college for. So the sewing, the pattern making, learning how to take body measurements and how to then design your own clothes and create the patterns and sew them, to do whatever you want with them, whether that's sell them or, create for yourself or for, family members. So just, I think offering that to the community for people to be able to learn a craft like that and actually utilize it however they want, whether it's individually or, commercially, that is something that I think does promote, the boys and girls and wanting to kind of further educate themselves on something that can actually be useful in the real world, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think about like fashion in Iowa? Because, most people have to order online and things like that. And honestly, I feel like we also need a lot of new, how you're a very good designer and things. We need like more people like you to come down here and help out, make like more fashion stuff. So what do you think about that?
That's a great question. And actually just a little bit of background on me. I actually moved here from Chicago where I went to school when I started my business. And when I did that, people were like, well, why are you going to Iowa to start a fashion business? That doesn't make any sense.
It sounds like an oxymoron to us. Yeah.
Right.
In Iowa.
Going from Chicago to Iowa. But, the way that the fashion industry is going is there are less people, opening boutiques just because of the cost of rent and that sort of thing. So you don't necessarily need to be in a storefront. And when I moved to Iowa, the focus was, the handmade. I have my studio space here at Mainframe, which has been, the best opportunity that I could have asked for. And there's nothing like this in Chicago or LA or New York, the big fashion capitals in the United States. So just to be able to have the opportunity to grow my business in a sense of affordability is game changing, because if I think about trying to do what I've done here in Des Moines back in Chicago, I don't think it would have been as successful. And one of the things that I noticed about Des Moines and the fashion scene here is that, yes, it's small, but people are more interested in that slow fashion movement here in Des Moines and in Iowa, and they want to support a small business, a local designer, as opposed to larger cities where you see the trend of, kind of just repping the biggest label or that sort of thing. So in that sense, I think that Des Moines has a great advantage in the fashion industry here. I do believe, like what you said, Love Tea, getting people to realize that is a little bit challenging, but I think, buildings like Mainframe, which are here to support artists and kind of help get the word out there, will help. And just, the small designers that are here being involved in the community and, trying to get the word out that Des Moines and Iowa does have a fashion scene, we do. And it's, it's a fashion scene that has good values and, that they want to support the slow fashion movement. They want to, it's evident because of what I do and all the students that I have that people are interested in design and sewing and, sustainability in that sense, as opposed to,
Why do you think that's different here than in, say, Chicago or LA or New York?
That's a good question. I think Chicago is still in the Midwest, but it's it's kind of a melting pot of people from all over. And I think here in Iowa, because we have the Midwest nice, I guess, people are more interested in the community and supporting it, and they want to see it grow and develop and thrive. Whereas places like Chicago, LA, and New York, they're already thriving. They already have such a scene in any industry, whether that's restaurant, fashion, theater, anything. So you don't see a lot of the smaller businesses because they're being outshone. I don't know if that's the right word to say, but they're being covered by the Michigan Avenues and the Fifth Avenues and the Rodeo Drives, because that's where people tend to do majority of the shopping, specifically for fashion industries. And I'm not saying that New York and LA and Chicago don't have, a slow fashion movement. They do. It's just, it's nice to be in a place, me, in Des Moines, where I'm not, being overshadowed so much by the alternative, which is those large brands. And
yeah, because there's a lot of fashion and more popular stuff in Chicago, New York, those bigger states, and it's actually hard to find your own business down there because it's already crowded, and then you always have to be under that one person that's not going to give you good advice and things like that.
Yeah, it's pretty saturated. And I had some great experiences when I was in Chicago. I worked for a couple of wholesale showrooms, and I was a personal stylist for a while. I had great mentors, but I feel like that goes back to me and my work ethic. You have to kind of know what you want, like you do, and go on that narrow path to getting there and kind of figuring out your own way. I didn't go to New York or LA to work for a big design house, because that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do more the individual small business things. So that's kind of what I sought out in Chicago while I was there anyway, which was hard. There's not much of it. I mean, there is, but it's a hard market there.
Would you kind of say then that the Des Moines Metro is, could we call ourselves leader-like in this slow fashion movement, in this sustainable fashion movement?
I think so, and I'm purely going back to the fact that our community wants to support people like us and the artists that are here at Mainframe. Specifically, we've got a lot of cool little neighborhoods here, Valley Junction, East Village, which are full of small local businesses that are doing well. Both those neighborhoods are growing. Here at Mainframe, I know there's a waiting list of over 100 people for a studio. And every Friday we do an event at the building, and it's always packed, and people are just excited to see that there is this available in Des Moines. And I have people come through my studio on First Fridays, and they're like, wow, I can't believe this is here in Des Moines. This is so cool. You don't see this anywhere else. And it's true, because you don't. There's not really, specifically Mainframe, I know I keep coming back to that. There's not really anything else like Mainframe anywhere else.
One of the things that had occurred to me, and I'm asking you to correct this presumption, because I'm sure based on what you've had to say it's wrong, but fix it a little bit. Until I met you and we had this conversation, I tended to think of fashion as a little bit more divisive than unifying. In other words, this concept of high fashion, and it's for a certain class of people who can afford it, that kind of thing. You're kind of turning that on its ear a little bit. Reconcile those worlds for me, this high fashion world versus kind of this sustainable, handmade, Des Moines version.
That's a great question too. And one that I used to hear it more, I guess, back when I was first starting, but when people hear the word custom or handmade, they automatically think, oh, I can't afford that, but for me and my business specifically, I still wanted to be able to reach, a wide variety of people. And so I consciously make my clothing affordable, because of the business model that I have. I don't, purchase yards and yards of fabric ahead of time to make anything, which again goes towards the sustainability, because then I'm not just wasting or sitting on a bunch of fabric. And it also allows me to make the cost of the garments that I'm making, a good price point. And speaking of high end, versus, fast fashion versus slow fashion versus sustainable versus secondhand. There's just so much in the fashion industry, and, you see a huge push in the secondhand movement too, which it coincides with slow fashion. It's the same, because people are wanting to repurpose and, shop, thrift and all of that stuff. And it's not like a faux pas like it used to be where, oh, you have to buy your clothes at the thrift store. That's, that means that you don't have money. No, it's just because that's my style and that's how I want to represent it. And I think it's the same thing for slow fashion versus high end, which I guess can sometimes be the same thing depending on what you're specifically looking at. But yeah, it's not as, like you said, divisive in the sense that, oh, custom handmade garment, I can't afford that. No, you just have to find the right place to get it, and I guess just do a little bit of research on the companies too, because some of those high-end companies are not, they don't really have, necessarily the sustainable business model if that's something that's important to you. And it's, when you think of handmade, like for my clothing, it is handmade. It's completely patterned, designed, and cut and sewn by me. Whereas, you're not going to find that even in a lot of custom places. They'll usually take measurements and then have those shipped overseas. Someone else is making it. I mean, it's still handmade, but it's not usually when I have my custom clients that come to me for the handmade custom garments, they know that I'm the one making it. It's not being shipped out. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but.
How does all this kind of translate into community building? How does this world of fashion that we have in Des Moines that's probably a little bit more sustainably led and handmade led translate into us going shoulder to shoulder as a community?
So, the past couple of months, I've done a few different projects which were exciting for the community. One, which is pretty notable, is for the disability rights of Iowa. And again, when I guess going back to the divisiveness of fashion, it's becoming more inclusive as an industry with sizing and that sort of thing as we, kind of celebrate the body positivity movement. But you still see a huge gap in the adaptable clothing industry for, people with disabilities. So as far as a community, kind of trying to bring that to the forefront was a good project for me to be involved with. And, we worked with 3 models that had different disabilities, one which was wheelchair bound, a couple which had, more sensory issues with their clothing that people don't necessarily think about when they're thinking about, shopping. And it's hard for them to find clothing that's affordable again, so just being able to, make the community aware of that, I guess, is a good thing and something that was a good community building movement.
It sounds fantastic. I mean, it sounds like a really important thing to do. And I remember being here for a fashion show that I was sick I didn't know about in advance because Love Tea would have loved it. Tell me a little bit how that fashion show that was so exciting and full of energy here at one of Mainframe's First Fridays came to be.
Yeah, so that again, I guess, kind of piggybacking with the community here at Mainframe, each First Friday they do a different theme of sorts to focus on to bring the community out and get excited about the events. And back in September, we did kind of a fashion themed First Friday where there was a runway show that incorporated wearable wreaths from an artist in the building, some jewelry from artists in the building, clothing from myself, music, food, drinks, and then just bringing the community here to celebrate all that, diversity with the different boutiques and things that were showing their clothing, and also to kind of, invite people for other First Fridays within the community and other events that were happening in Des Moines related to fashion. Fashion Week here in Des Moines is a fairly new thing, but that was going on later in the month, so we were able to kind of promote that, which was exciting.
So what are good words to say to someone who are struggling in, a fashion class? What will you say to them?
I would say that it takes a lot of hard work and dedication, blood, sweat, and tears. that I still experience sometimes. But if you love it, it's worth it, and just to stick with it, because it's a really rewarding experience, especially depending on what it is that you want to provide for your clients. But most of the time with the fashion industry, it's closely related to self-confidence and body image issues, which is kind of a fun thing to help clients celebrate and learn to be proud of what they look like and get excited about what they're wearing, because a lot of confidence can come from fashion, and on the other side, a lot of I'm not so sure, insecurities can come from it too. So just kind of deciding what makes it important for you and why you love it, and just remembering kind of when you're going through those hard, frustrating times, why you're doing it, but it is a lot of work. And a lot of people don't realize that, and that kind of, I can bring it back to the fast fashion. It's like you're going to be shopping at a place, like Forever 21. I hate to keep dragging them through the mud, but it's it's just the relative example. And the people that are making your clothing, they're not working in good environments, and they're not getting paid. So just kind of knowing that you can be a small help in the change of that by promoting, the slow fashion and small business movement.
Well, I want to thank you, Gretchen Bohling, for giving my friend Love Tea Toady some great advice as she pursues her interest in fashion. And I want to remind everybody that what Gretchen was having to say about First Fridays at Mainframe Studios holds true month after month after month, usually 5 to 8 p.m., so please don't miss it. Thank you for listening to 900 Views.